Hello, Board of Education. This is Tony Galan from Student Services. I wanted to offer an opportunity to learn more about how we are restructuring special education services at Leman Middle School. This presentation is about 15 minutes. I made a brief presentation a few weeks ago at a board meeting, but I know there was a lot of information, and if you are like me, it helps to hear it again with more specific detail. I would like to restate that all of these changes are being made with the full support and involvement of Mark Campbell and Jean Blanchard. A special education term we use a lot is least restrictive environment. Our goal is to keep children in the general education classroom as much as possible. The general education classroom is the regular classroom a child would be in if he or she was not receiving special education services. Under our current model, students who are receiving special education services are not in one or more general education class. These students may miss science, social studies, TAP, and/or exploratory. The class that the child is in instead of those is referred to as an intervention class. These focus on reading or math. On the child's IEP, it is reflected that this class is a special education service provided in a separate special education setting. So in all honesty, we already have self-contained classrooms at the middle school. We just do not call it that. In the intervention classes, there are also students who are not receiving special education services. These students have been identified as low achieving and in need of additional instruction. Our current model of using intervention classes for both students with IEPs and others without IEPs has two major issues. The first is it takes students out of core curriculum. This sets them up for failure at high school because they are not pre-exposed to the academic vocabulary and content of these classes. There is another issue that is worth repeating, so you will hear about it again on a later slide. The interventions are written in a child's IEP as being a separate special education setting. However, we have students who are not identified as receiving special education in these classes as well. This means we are essentially putting non-IEP students into a special education classroom. We are opening ourselves up to potential legal issues by continuing that model. Continuing on about educational environment, the state has 3 choices for students in our district schools. We must report every year the number of students we have in each environment. Our goal is to keep children in the general education setting as much as possible. Our goal is to keep children in setting 0-1. That would mean we are keeping them with their non-disabled peers to the greatest extent possible. We also calculate the exact percentage of time a child is in the general education environment, as well as the percentage of time he or she receives special education services. Our new true co-teaching model will allow a child to stay in the general education environment and receive the special education services there. Just to recap the current model, students have literature and math in the general education classroom with minimal assistance from facilitators. They lose science, social studies, TAP, and/or exploratory to have intervention classes for reading and/or math, which is considered a self-contained setting. Here is a sample of a schedule many students have at Leman Middle School. It shows Rigor, which is a 2-period-long reading intervention class, and towards the end of the day the child has VMath, which is a 1-period math intervention. You may notice that this child does not have science, social studies, or exploratory. Currently, this child spends 3 periods a day in a setting that is reflected on his or her IEP as a special education separate classroom. Remember, those students also have those classes also have students who are not receiving special education services. Here is the same sample schedule. This time, I added in the number of minutes each week this child spends in the classroom. Each period at Leman Middle School is 41 minutes in length. This means each period totals 205 minutes of instruction each week. In special education, we refer to bell-to-bell minutes. That is the time spent in school that includes passing periods. At Leman, our bell-to-bell minutes each week total 2,025. All percentages are calculated using the bell-to-bell minutes of 2,025. So this child is in the general education setting for 70% of his or her school day. An average child who is in a co-taught math or literature class currently receives about 100 minutes of support each week in each of those classes. Remember, under the current model, the facilitator cannot be in the classroom each day because of how the schedule is built. So if we add the 615 minutes from the special education intervention classes, plus 100 minutes a week of co-taught literature, plus 100 minutes a week of co-taught math, the total would be 815 minutes per week of time from the special education teacher. So this child spends 40% of the day receiving instruction from their special education facilitator. Both of those percentages are part of a child's IEP and should be reviewed with the parents annually. Here's another slide showing the calculations for percentages. I'll give you a moment to review it. Here we go back to the special education term, least restrictive environment. Remember, the goal is to keep students with their non-disabled peers. A child with the sample schedule as shown would be a category 0-2. Our goal is to keep as many children as possible in the 0-1 category. So here is a schedule that reflects the proposed changes. This schedule reflects that a student would be in self-contained classrooms for 2 periods each day. The entire rest of this child's day will be in the general education setting. Additionally, this child has science, social studies, and exploratory classes. Here are the calculations from the child's schedule under the proposed model. Since this child is in self-contained for 2 periods a day versus the 3 in the previous schedule, this child is in the general education environment for 80% of the school day. Once again, remember the state mandates we report every child's educational environment. Children under the proposed service delivery model will be 0-1, which means he or she is in the general education environment for 80% or more of his or her school day. I wanted to recap one of the motivating factors about the delivery model. I will openly acknowledge that the words self-contained do not conjure a positive image in most people's minds. However, in this new model, we are putting students back into content areas from which they were previously excluded. Also, as the calculations ultimately show, they end up in a less restrictive environment than under the current model of services at Leman Middle School. In our current intervention classes, the programs are scripted. Teachers are expected to implement the lessons with fidelity, so we know it looks the same in every classroom. Under the new model, teachers will tailor the instruction to fit the student's needs. We plan on using small group reading and small group math instruction with lots of hands-on exploration to keep children engaged. Teachers will also be encouraged to use assessment data to regularly adjust their instruction as often as needed so that they meet the needs of all students in the classroom. Please remember that not every child with an IEP will be placed in a self-contained classroom. Students must be more than 2 years discrepant, have an identified academic need in that area with an IEP goal to address it, as well as show deficits in executive functioning skills. And I will explain more about that momentarily. We have started talking with parents about these changes, and we will not place a child into a self-contained classroom without a meaningful conversation with parents first. Any child who does not meet the aforementioned criteria would be put in a co-taught class. This means they are 100% in the general education environment. I also wanted to take a moment to reflect that this change was presented to Tiffany Chavez, who is the Special Education Director at West Chicago Community High School. She was thrilled we're moving towards a model that reflects the services that are delivered at the high school. She commented that we currently send students who are not ready for science and social studies. Students have gone years without exposure to academic vocabulary and content in the subject areas, so we are setting them up to fail. The new model will increase the students' chances for success in all content areas. There were a few other points I wanted to highlight. I originally said that we would not call it self-contained, as that has a negative connotation. I realize in hindsight, it could appear as if we are trying to misrepresent what we are doing. When I commented that we would not call it self-contained, I meant on the child's schedule. I do not want to hand a child a schedule to carry around that has classes labeled as special education or self-contained. I wanted a class name on the child's schedule that would not be seen as embarrassing to a middle school student. It will be written on the child's IEP as a separate special education setting, and it will be reviewed with the parents annually. Another point worth saying many times is we are currently placing regular education students into intervention classes that are identified as separate special education classes for some. A class must either be an environment of general education or special education. It cannot be both. I had a lengthy talk with our law firm and was advised to stop the practice as it opens us up to potential legal issues, and the bottom line is we would lose should a parent file a complaint against us. This is a chart that gives a quick overview of full inclusion, co-taught classes, and self-contained classes. I will pause to let you review it. One thing to highlight is that children may only be in one self-contained classes. If they are in only one, that would mean their educational environment is 0-1, where 80% or more of the day is spent in the general education setting. So several slides ago, I alluded that a child's executive function skills would be considered as part of the enrollment criteria for self-contained classes. So executive function is controlled by your brain's frontal lobe. These skills control memory, problem solving, self-control, and self-awareness. They are critical to a child's success and happiness, not only in academics, but in their personal lives and relationships as well. Executive function covers the what to do skills, like starting tasks, paying attention, persevering on a task, and remembering information. They also cover the how to do skills, like planning, organizing, shifting strategies, and managing time. Executive function includes the ability to switch focus, remember details, curb inappropriate speech or behavior, and integrate past experience with present action. Here's a graphic to show the areas we are collecting information in to determine if a child struggles with executive functioning. Warning signs that a child may be having difficulty with executive function include trouble in planning projects, estimating how much time a project will take to complete, telling stories, verbally or in writing, memorizing information, initiating activities or tasks, retaining information while doing something with it. So, for example, remembering a phone number as you are dialing it. There's a lot of research coming out that shows children with disabilities who have strong executive functioning skills have a greater chance at remaining in the general education setting and therefore a greater chance of success as they move through high school and the ability to enter college. We plan to incorporate executive functioning instruction as part of the self-contained classrooms. Our long-range plan is that students who start in self-contained classrooms as 6th graders should not all be in self-contained classes as 8th graders. We truly believe in our students' ability to learn and grow, and we know that by supporting them with meaningful instruction at their level that is very engaging, we will close gaps and raise achievement for all of our students. I appreciate your time and attention. Should you have any questions, need clarification, or simply want to engage in dialogue about our students, please do not hesitate to reach out to me. Thank you.